Welcome to the Jubilee Museum series. Today's program will focus on the priceless artifacts in the museum's collection that deal with the early history of Catholicism in Ohio. I'm Wanda Dengel, your host, and joining me from Columbus, Ohio, in the Jubilee Museum is Shawn Kenney, Executive Director. Good morning, Shawn. Good morning. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great. I got my teeth cleaned, so it's always a good day.
Great, great. Well, we're ready to roll. I understand that Somerset, Ohio is considered the cradle of Catholicism in Ohio.
It is, absolutely.
But I also understand that we have to travel to Maryland to understand the background for the history of this, Catholicism in Ohio.
Absolutely, because a lot of people don't realize, Wanda, the Catholic Church in the United States really wasn't founded formally until a lot later, after our country's founding. And I know you've researched Bishop Carroll, Wanda, so I'm excited to hear this.
Okay, all right. Well, John Carroll was the first bishop and first archbishop of the United States. Could we bring up that photo of John Carroll? There he is. And John Carroll was selected bishop by the clergy of the U.S. And the reason for that is because there was a lot of anti-Catholicism at the time. And also the colonies were, were trying to become independent and didn't want any influence of foreign powers. So the clergy asked that a bishop be selected from among them so that it didn't look like foreign powers would be taking over. So that's how John Carroll was selected as bishop. There were 26 votes, and 24 of those votes were for John Carroll. He was made bishop in 1789, and he had a cousin, Charles Carroll of Carrollton. His father was Charles Carroll of Annapolis, but Charles Carroll of Carrollton was a signatory of the Declaration of Independence, and he also served in the Continental Congress. He was the first U.S. Senator in Maryland. Right now on the screen we have the certificate. The original is in the church, the cathedral in Baltimore, but this is the certificate that shows that John Carroll was made Bishop of the United States, the first bishop. Do you have something of John Carroll's there at the museum?
I absolutely do. Very interesting pieces, actually. Hold these up real quick. These are actually splotches. I'll get a little closer here so you guys can see. These are splotches from John Carroll's vestments. And a little bit different than a lot of vestments you might see a priest wearing today. This was at a time where material was very, very, very expensive. So what did you do? You reused other material. So these actually were pieces from his mother, Eleanor's wedding dress. So originally wedding dress material. Now this is at a time, a woman would take her wedding dress and make their daughter's christening dress out of her wedding dress, first communion dresses, and whatnot. You reuse your material. Nowadays, you take your wedding dress and throw it in a cedar chest, and it's never seen again. So, but at a time where paper and material was valued and reused as much as possible. But we're very lucky to have these three splotches of his vestments and his mother's wedding dress. This dates back to 1729. This material, so we're very lucky to have it here.
That's pretty awesome, because as you said, those things had to be imported. Material had to be imported, and you had to wait a long time, and so reusing what you had was an excellent idea, and it was very common during that period. Well, John Carroll must have come from a wealthy family, because I noticed that some of that material was brocade, which would have been very expensive at that time.
Very much so.
John Carroll also established the first Catholic university in the United States. Could we bring that picture up? And that university is Georgetown University.
There it is.
And in front of Georgetown University, there is a sculpture of John Carroll that was added many years later. Georgetown was established in 1789. And then the next photograph, well, it's an illustration, shows John Carroll laying the cornerstone to the Cathedral of the Assumption, which was the first cathedral in the United States in Baltimore, Ohio. And an interesting fact about that cathedral is that the architect, whose name was Benjamin Harry Latrobe, was the same architect who designed the U.S. Capitol.
Absolutely.
So that is, John Carroll is the background for the Catholicism in Ohio. Could you explain what the connection is between John Carroll and Somerset?
Yeah, so this goes into a Jacob Ditto, an early settler down in Somerset in Perry County. And, if you were a Catholic at the time, you kind of just did your own thing.
Could we get the painting?
Yep, it'd be great to pull that up. And in the Catholic Church, we read from the Bible, but we also have the sacraments, which Jacob Ditto was missing. As a layperson, you obviously couldn't do the consecration. You couldn't, marry somebody. And obviously, you could baptize somebody. Anybody could do that, but it had to be in an emergency situation where somebody wished to be baptized. You would do the pouring, and then obviously call upon the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Jacob Ditto sitting here with his family reading the Bible, but missing the sacraments. And so he began writing Bishop Carroll, and saying, I'm Jacob Ditto. We have Catholics here in Ohio, and we're missing the sacraments. Could we please have a priest sent to us? So he actually sent several letters over a time period, and finally Father Fenwick arrived in 1811. But one beautiful piece we have here at the museum, which was actually given to us by the Ditto family themselves, and actually Mike Ditto is on our board of trustees here at the museum. Not very many families can go back with their family tree almost 280 years. So pretty spectacular. But when they came here a while back, they gave us this beautiful piece that's in front of me here, and I'll hold it up a little closer. This is one of the two land grants from the property that Jacob Ditto had purchased down in Somerset. And there were two parcels. This part of the land was where the church sits now, and Jacob Ditto is buried. And I'd love to have the other land grant. We're working on that. So we'd have the property where the first Mass was said. But I'll hold this up a little bit. So this document goes back to 1808. I'm going to try to do it so I don't get the glare on there. There we go. 1808, this states that Jacob Ditto had paid in full for the property in Perry County. This, again, later is where the church that exists there now was built, and where Jacob Ditto is buried. But an interesting piece about this is, obviously, Thomas Jefferson was the president of the United States at the time.
I can see his signature over on the right.
I'll get a little closer here so you can see it. And James Madison was Secretary of State.
Could you go down a little bit lower so we could see James Madison's? There you go.
See a little better?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, what's interesting is James Madison became the 4th president in 1809, a year after this document was written. So 2 of our presidents on this document. And another interesting thing I'll point out is Chillicothe was the capital of Ohio at the time. It was not Columbus yet. So very interesting. The wording on this, it's amazing today. These old manuscripts come into the museum. The time that was spent to handwrite these, to print these, it's a piece of art in itself. And then let alone the fact that it's got 2 presidents' signatures on it, it's even more amazing. So we're very, very lucky to have this here at the museum. And again, in 1811, Father Fenwick arrives, and now this is obviously a property owned by the church down there. It's very, very beautiful if you've never been down to Perry County into St. Joseph's. Now we also have Wanda, Jacob Ditto's personal Bible, which I'll show you. This was another beautiful gift from the Ditto family to us. The Bible itself dates back to about 1790. Jacob Ditto did sign the inside cover in 1808, the same year as this document. And since the inside cover is completely loose, I will hold the document up so you can see his signature when he signed this.
Was that when Father Fenwick said the first Mass under the tree, 1808?
Yeah, so obviously this is not a sacramentary, so the actual words of the consecration wouldn't have came out of this, but they could have done the readings out of this Bible, absolutely. And most likely, and this is at a time where you did not, you were lucky to own a book at all, let alone a Bible. The first book you would own was a Bible. So this probably was the only book that the Ditto family owned at the time. So, and again, most likely the one that was used for the first readings for the first Mass.
Could you hold the entire book up again?
Absolutely. There is some of the family tree in this as well.
It looks like it was well used.
It absolutely was. And in great shape. The family said that they had this wrapped up for years, and they opened it up and got the family tree out of it, and then they gave it to the museum here. So when you come for a tour here, you're actually getting exposed to what you're hearing today on this show. You get a little story about Bishop Carroll and about the Ditto family and the history of how the church started in Ohio. So very, very, very cool. Now, going back to, if we can continue on a little bit, we can talk about Bishop Fenwick a little bit. He was another neat man. I know we have a photograph of him as well, if we can maybe pull that up.
Yeah. Bishop Fenwick. The next.
Bishop Fenwick was a Dominican. And we do, so the parish down there today, St. Joseph's, is a Dominican parish. St. Patrick's here in Columbus is a Dominican parish. And then St. Thomas the Apostle out in Zanesville was a Dominican parish till this past year when the Dominicans pulled out and is now absorbed by the Diocese of Columbus.
So he first came to the Ditto farm and said that first Mass under the oak tree. Is that correct?
Correct. It was under a tree on the property there. And here at the museum, we do have a relic, if you will, of the piece of tree. I'll hold this up. This is pretty cool.
Could you hold it up a little bit? There you go.
So this is a piece of the tree from under which the first Mass in the state of Ohio was said on the property down there in Perry County. When Father Fenwick arrived, he met the family. He most likely would have heard all of their confessions. And actually, I think you have a painting as well of Father Fenwick arriving and giving the family a blessing. The story goes that there's the image. The story goes that Father Fenwick was walking, and he actually found Jacob Ditto. He could hear him out in the woods. He was cutting down trees with an axe. So he found him that way. And here's the family, who's been longing for a priest all this time and finally gets their answer. He had been writing Bishop Carroll for several years. Of course, this was a hard time. It's, probably getting 1,000 letters a day. Please, we need a priest. We need a priest. And of course, you didn't, get your automobile or, get on the phone and say, hey, we'll be up. This was at a time where you had to many weeks to travel to get reneeded.
Months sometimes. And we have an image of a replica of what that first church looked like.
Yeah, so this building was erected in 1818, and actually this is the 200th anniversary year of the first church that was built here in Ohio, first Catholic church. It was a log cabin originally, and this little model that you see is actually in the museum there at St. Joseph's on the property. And what's really cool is it's actually made out of the wood from the original log cabin, this replica.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
It would not have been a very large chapel, and of course, wood and fire don't mix, so it did burn down. But they were able to save a couple pieces of the wood to build this little replica. One thing that the museum would love to do in the future is to replicate or help replicate the original log cabin on the exact spot that it sat originally. They know exactly where it sat. So kind of a neat piece of history, and maybe one day we'll get to help reassemble something like that for them. But again, 1818 was the first church building was completed and the first mass said in it. So 200 years.
Right. But the first mass not in a building was in 1808. So Catholicism in Ohio has it has been around for more than 200 years.
Absolutely.
Although they didn't have a priest on a regular basis, but at least the first mass was celebrated in 1808. So Father Fenwick became Bishop Fenwick. Absolutely,
down in Cincinnati. And there's actually, I think, even a school down there named after him at this point. But it's amazing how quickly the church grew in just a very short amount of time. Even the church that's down there today was built in 1843. It's still standing. But by that point, we were building churches here in Columbus by 1852. In 1848, we were building Holy Cross and St. Patrick's. So it caught on very quickly. The Cleveland Diocese was founded, the Toledo Diocese, and we started building churches all over the state. And then, of course, this was happening, Pennsylvania and Virginia and Illinois and Indiana as well, very quickly.
So Father Fenwick became the first bishop of Ohio.
Correct, in the Cincinnati Diocese. So I believe he's buried down there as well.
Yes.
Might even be in the cathedral there.
I understand that was first bishop of Ohio, but we have another man who was the first bishop of the Catholic Diocese of Columbus. And
Absolutely.
You have some information on him.
So Bishop Rosecrans, very neat man, first bishop of Columbus. And again, when you come to the museum, we do have a glass case that we have artifacts from the different bishops. There's zucchettos, and there's some of their theology books, and we have Bishop Reedy's vestments, the chalice veil that matches Requiem vestments that he was buried in. But we do have an interesting piece that belonged to Bishop Rosecrans, the first bishop of Columbus. Most people go, "What is that? Why do you have that?" So we have his teapot up close here. Very well made teapot. But this was his personal teapot he had at the rectory. We do have a document that's actually in German that is signed by him as well upstairs. But Bishop Rosecrans is really noted not just as the first bishop of the Diocese of Columbus, but also as the one who built the cathedral, St. Joseph's Cathedral in downtown Columbus. He was the one who dealt with the architects and had it designed and built. During this time, he actually lived at St. Patrick's, the Dominican parish here in Columbus. I believe that building was completed in 1852-ish. And obviously, that was the Irish parish as well here in Columbus. So he was in residence there while the cathedral was being constructed. And it was completed in the late 1870s, I believe. Now, another interesting fact, when you do a dedication of a church or a cathedral, it's a big event. So bishops would have come from all over for this. and there's a huge, I encourage you to look it up online, the ceremonies that are behind the dedication of a cathedral, or even the dedication of a church. There's people inside the church, the bishop is outside, and they bless the outside of the building, and they actually knock on the doors, and people respond back and forth, and finally they open the doors of the church. It's a really neat ceremony. We could talk all day about that. But going into some more about Bishop Rosecrans. So the bishops came in, they dedicated the cathedral, everybody had dinner, and a lot of the bishops went ahead and left. This was at a time where you were taking a stagecoach or a train. So to get back to your diocese would take you a couple days at the time. But the next day, he actually, I believe, had a heart attack or a stroke, and he ended up passing away only a few days after the cathedral's dedication. So very, very sad story, but it's also like he completed what he needed to do and left it on to the next bishop. So if you come to the cathedral here, St. Joseph's downtown, very beautiful cathedral. Their catacombs downstairs are really neat. You got the brick arch ceilings, which are really neat. But he's actually buried in the basement of our cathedral.
Could we show that picture of Father Rosecrans before he became bishop? From what I understand, he was a very learned man. He was very brilliant. And he also was a convert. He grew up as a Methodist. And one of his older brothers had converted to Catholicism, and both Sylvester and his other brothers converted to Catholicism. I also understand that Bishop Rosecrans is buried in the undercroft of St. Joseph Cathedral. Could we have a picture of that, please? There it is.
Now,
there it is.
There are several bishops buried down there, and I believe Bishop Griffin will also be buried down there. He's still living in Columbus, and he was actually the bishop who allowed the museum to open in the first place back in 1998. Great man. But not all of our bishops of the diocese are buried there. We've got Bishop Watterson, who a lot of people are familiar with. He's buried out at Mount Calvary Cemetery here. He's got a really, really neat tomb. And you can't miss it. It's huge. It's the only one with the bishop's mitre on top. But St. Joseph's Cemetery, which is actually toward your direction, Wanda, heading south on 23, one of our big Catholic cemeteries here in Columbus. Two of the bishops are buried outside the chapel there as well. So very, very cool. History is an amazing thing, and it's amazing what we can learn from it. Just our short history of Catholicism in the United States is amazing. But when you look at Catholicism as a whole, looking back at some of our previous episodes, we've got a rich history going back, over 2,000 years at this point. So just amazing how Christianity has branched out and how it's changed, and how, just in a short amount of time, all these churches expanding in the United States. 200 years is not a long time when you look at history of everything that's ever happened in the world. So,
well, I think it's pretty amazing that the Ditto family had the foresight to cut off a part of a tree where that first Mass was celebrated, and to also include everything that shows the history of Catholicism in Ohio. I invite our viewers to visit the Jubilee Museum, which is located at 57 South Grub Street in Columbus, Ohio, and you can see these artifacts, these priceless artifacts in the museum's collection up close and personal. Please visit Shawn and the museum anytime, Monday through
Saturday from 10 to 4 and Sunday from 1 to 4. But watch our hours. Or some of our hours may be changing, so keep on our website and take a look at that. We also have some pretty neat exhibits coming up too, Wanda, if I can throw a little shout out. In a few weeks here, we have a lot of people have been exposed to the Morris Dosh story here, a local owner of a business who actually survived the Holocaust, and a Catholic priest encouraged him to come to America after he lost his entire family to death camps. As a young child, he came here and was very successful and had a respect for the Catholic Church. So we always mention him on our tours. His daughter, Debbie Sugarman, is coming next Thursday to give a talk about his life here at the museum. That's on our website. Also, in a few weeks, we have the Blarney Hearts, an Irish group. They're going to be coming here to perform some Irish music, and we'll have some food and corned beef and cabbage here. And the museum will be open, kind of more of a lively event here, but something neat to get people involved and get the Irish blood pumping. And we even invite Croatians, Wanda.
Well, I'm sure there will be a lot of people from all ethnicities who will be coming to the
Who doesn't like
museum.
corned beef and cabbage?
Sounds like a wonderful evening. We look forward to seeing you again. We hope you will join us next month when we present another program of the Jubilee Museum. Thank you for viewing. Bye, Shawn.
Thank you.